Welcome back to Out of the Fold. If you haven't listened to the first part of my interview with Isaac, please do so before listening to this one. No religious organizations, companies, or individuals were contacted for comment about any of the content of this episode. The views expressed are strictly those of the ones expressing them. So what happened next? What was would you say that you were starting to question thoroughly at that time after you asked that one question about the basically the flat Earth theory?
Right. So at that point I was already starting to become a bit distasteful of some of the social aspects of Orthodox Judaism. Like there's a lot of another fundamental aspect of Orthodox Judaism is gender separation.
Mm-hmm.
Men and women do not intermingle; they do not mix. And depending on how severe you are, it can be they never even look in each other's eyes or speak to each other, except for husband and wife. Obviously, we all know Jews love having kids. Not a stereotype, fact. It's one of the commandments in the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply, to have as many kids as you can, which is the reason Jews do this. It is a commandment. And I know Mormons have similar ideas. That the idea is to be fruitful and populate the earth as much as possible.
It's not a stereotype if it's right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if it's a core belief, then it's not a stereotype.
It's a core belief, and it's a statistical fact. Jews have, on average, much larger households than the average American.
Mm-hmm.
So this gender separation is a key component, which is interesting because in the Torah and even in the Talmud and all these books leading up to this, like the idea of modesty for women and like gender separation kind of was like it's there, but it was not emphasized the same way it's emphasized today. Like it was the same way we don't eat pig, like you don't touch a woman who's not your wife. Like it wasn't like so emphasized. Like, but today it is because the world has become gradually more secular and obviously it's becoming more acceptable for men and women to intermingle. And I mean, not that it ever wasn't unacceptable, but the world is becoming more secular in terms of religions as well, and it's becoming more in your face, like in terms of that gender separation. I would say it can be an issue, and it can often be taken way beyond what halacha would even require. Although halacha does require some pretty intense stuff with regard to modesty and gender separation. But for me, I started to see, like, I went to all boys schools my entire life. Up until senior year, I went to all boys elementary school. The yeshiva I went to, like, a fundamental part of a yeshiva is, like, if it's a yeshiva, it's an all boys yeshiva. Like, there's no such thing as a girls yeshiva. Like, yeshiva is for studying Torah, and boys study Torah. Girls also study Torah, but girls do not study Talmud. They study other sections of text. And there is much less of a focus on intellectual study and much more of a focus on practical study, as in like how to raise a family, how to have a lot of kids, how to cook, like stuff like that. The laws behind cooking, which, yes, it is sexist, but also that's just how it was. Like the woman for thousands of years, the woman raised the family and the men provided. Like that's just how it was. So that's how the laws developed. But obviously we don't quite live in a society like that anymore. And the gender separation can often be taken way too far. Like in yeshivish and Hasidic places, so I know this because I've spoken with girls who are in like the girl version of a yeshiva is kind of like almost like a seminary, like a religious seminary. Like it's all girls. They all have to wear a uniform. They all have to, conform to very specific rules, or they will be kicked out of the school because it's a private school. They have the right to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And these schools, it is taught to them on an extreme level that like the most important thing you can do as a Jewish girl is to be modest and to like cover yourself up and to not. But it gets way extreme. Like I'm talking like. They are taught verbatim that like if a man looks at you in a sexual way, it is your fault because you were too like alluring, like literally like she deserved it because she was dressed that way. Like And you are responsible for that man's sins. Like if he masturbates or whatever, like that is your fault. You made him do that. It's taught to them like don't go out in public with wet hair because a man might picture you in the shower.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't drink out of a can because it's not modest to draw attention to your mouth. Like insane stuff. And what this is to me, and what I started realizing what this is, it's basically the opposite of over sexualizing, which to be fair, society does do a lot. But it's basically the opposite of that. It's fetishizing it basically, and making it for the men. It's making it that even you're not even allowed to look at a woman or talk to a woman. Like what's that going to make you do? Think about women all the time, obviously. And all you can think about is women, and it ends up into this situation where so to touch briefly on this, masturbation, like many of the Abrahamic religions, is strictly forbidden in Orthodox Judaism, and it's never really taught in schools because anything about it is never really taught because in Orthodox Judaism there is this interesting phenomena of sexuality not really existing. Like the idea of sex and sexuality and sexual urges is simply not discussed ever. Like the word sex, the act of sex, sexual feelings outside of like private conversations or like when you're a little older, maybe sometimes they'll discuss it with you. But the teenagers, 14, 18-year-olds, it rarely discussed and certainly not discussed in any way below that age. Which is so interesting because the Torah and the Talmud actually are fairly frank when they're discussing sexuality and sex. Like they're just like, yeah, like you can have sex in this way or not this way, or like he had sex with this prostitute or like whatever happened. Like they're pretty open with it. But like even when you're teaching that over, like they use different words. Like they would never actually refer to like this, like you're because there's this idea which kind of stems from the teachings and from Shulchan Aruch that you're not even supposed to think sexual thoughts. That is a sin to think sexual thoughts. But that's impossible. Like human beings think sexual thoughts. Like that is like a fundamental aspect of being human. And as a 14-year-old, it is not pretty much physically impossible to not think sexual thoughts. And I think it's extremely damaging to try to force people not to. Which is so you have this kind of weird environment where sex is never discussed, it's never talked about. Maybe if you're lucky, like your parent had the talk with you, and for me that was my dad being like, you know what sex is, right? I'm like, yes, the kids at school already told me. And at some point I was like asking him like, can you give me like a little more detail here maybe? Like I'm really still not like so 100% clear. And he's like, no, you'll learn when you get married. Like that's when you learn about this. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll have to go figure it out myself. So and I started doing research on the internet and stuff that I may not have even stuff that's definitely sinful, like looking at porn and stuff like that. I may not have even had such a curiosity if they had just been open with me, but that's just not how things are done.
Right, just tell you the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's just not how things are done. The sex is not explained, and as as a human, we feel this sexual urge, and it's very frightening. Like you don't even know what's happening to you. Honestly, I had no idea what was happening to me when I was growing up. It was never taught. It was never discussed. And at some point, around 14, 15, like I had, been watching porn, masturbating occasionally, like any other teenager. At some point, it was kind of like discussed among my class, kind of maybe mentioned by a rabbi offhand that like masturbation is considered a sin. It's wrong. Why it's wrong is kind of debated and not super clear. One of the oldest cases that kind of is pointed to is the case of a guy named Onan, who was in the Bible, like in the Old Testament, who after the city of Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, Lot's wife got turned into a pillar of salt and all that happened. Onan was one of the people who was with them, and he was convinced that the world had just ended because he saw both cities get destroyed by fire and brimstone. So he wanted to like procreate with his daughters or something, and like God wanted him to do this for some reason.
Oh, good.
I'm not super clear on the details, but like God wanted him to do it to like repopulate the earth for some reason. I know it sounds crazy, but like it made sense at the time.
Yeah, there are a lot of biblical stories that are like that.
Yeah. But the main issue and the crux of the issue was that Onan he spilled his seed instead of impregnating this woman. Like
Hmm.
he didn't finish. He pulled out before he finished inside her. So, and that was considered like the sin of Onan is of wasting seed. That is like the first place it's pointed to, and it was like, and God was angry about this, and like that is the first place that is looked to for the idea that spilling seed is wrong.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, that was in the context of like sexual relations between adults, not masturbation. So, first of all, I'm not sure what that has to do with it, but it is definitely referred to. And there are like books kind of like written like within the Jewish community that are like for teenagers to read, like to how to safeguard yourself, and like the going into detail about how bad it is and how spiritually damaging it is, and how like a person who masturbates can never like learn Talmud with the proper intensity anymore, and how the a lot of stuff like that. And I even remember like as a teenager, I would feel so guilty. Like I would be like, God, I'm sorry. Like, please forgive me. Like, I can't control it. Like, it's too much of an urge. Like, and I would feel really, really awful about that stuff. And that combined with the fact that it's just never mentioned, never talked about, um, I think for me, definitely was not healthy. And I can't imagine it's too healthy for other people either.
I mean, I went through the same thing. I mean, I didn't go to a Christian school until I was in the middle of eighth grade, and like that was when I actually learned that masturbation was a sin. And like before that, I mean, I was just doing it. You know what I mean? Like I was pretty young, but like I basically didn't even know what it was. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like when somebody refers to a condom as a prophylactic. Like the first time I heard that, I was like, I have no idea what a prophylactic is. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so it's like I didn't know what masturbation even really was at the time. You know? So, but yeah, I mean, it can lead to so much of that, and of the shame and guilt of what you're talking about, and make you feel like you're human garbage for the fact that you can't control yourself. And yet, at the same time, you're probably feeling like you can't control yourself because you've been denied the even ability to talk to people about it.
Oh yeah, and more than that, you know, uh, and again, this is all part of the problem of this fixation on the fetishizing and fixation on sexuality, and the
Yeah.
reverse of sexuality,
Yep.
which is that the boys are told that they can't masturbate, they can't look at girls, talk to girls, or think about girls. They are just supposed to completely ignore all their incredibly strong urges as a teenager, as most men are aware of how strong these urges are. And for the girls, they are told that boys are they're not told this like directly, like word for word, but it is implied and kind of put upon girls that men cannot control themselves. Like they want to look at you, they want to do bad things to you, and it's your fault if they do. Like and it's up to you to like not let men see you and to hide yourself. Like a Jewish girl like keeps herself covered. Like and like again, it's so messed up because there are absolutely good aspects to modesty, and there are plenty of good traits to have, like about dressing, covering yourself up, like that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
But taking it to such extremes, and it's so damaging in my opinion. And 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 again, everything is viewed through the lens of Orthodox Judaism. There is no other perspective. Other perspectives are banned, like they are not allowed. And because of that, you really never get to see anything from an outside point of view, and it just all seems perfectly normal when you're in it.
Right. Right. I like the way that you put that, by the way, that it's like the desexualization gets so extreme that that sex becomes fetishized rather than just a normal part of human existence.
Well, oh, absolutely, 100%. And again, it's so strange because like there's no problem talking about like brutal murders or like anything like that, and like
Right.
it's like all fine, like violence, no problem in Judaism. But like you literally, sexuality does not exist. It is not spoken about, not discussed, not implied. For the girls, what happens is for the boys too, in many cases, um, they like what I said about my dad, like, oh, you're gonna learn when you get married. He meant that literally, as in like there is a class that you take to be taught about your own anatomy and what sex is, like a month before you get married. So you've spent your whole life as either a girl or a boy, either fighting your incredible urges or thinking that you're causing men to sin. And then a month before you get married, and by the way, the marriage, I'll talk a little bit about the marriage process, which is interesting as well. Kind of like semi arranged marriages, not exactly, but high pressure, let's say.
Hmm.
And you have this person who you really don't know all that well. You've maybe known him for six months to a year maximum. And a month before your wedding, you go to a class and a rabbi teaches you what sex is and like what your vagina is and like what it's for and like many women are not even aware of their own like reproductive organs or anatomy. Like and they are taught this, and then a month later they're expected to have a not only expected, required, like the commandment is you must consummate the marriage after the wedding. Like the commandment is you must have sex and immediately start having babies and like having sex all the time after 20 years of this complete removal and like just gone. Like so listen, it's been done for a while and obviously works for some people, but in my mind I can't, there has to be, I'm just not aware, but I like there definitely is dysfunction. I don't know the extent of it, but I know like there has to be so much dysfunction among these people, because like that just seems so unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, you basically raised to believe that the only reason to get married then, or like one of the only reasons to get married, is to continue the line, like
Exactly.
just to keep that going. Yeah, I mean that's dude, this whole thing about like the way that that women are taught about that. So I mean, we didn't have as much of that in Christianity. I mean, we definitely had sort of the idea that of modesty and that it can be a woman's fault, and there have been horrible things that we learned, like that if a woman gets raped, then she has two choices, and one of them is to be chaste for the rest of her life and to pray for forgiveness every day, and the other choice is to marry her rapist. Like it's these horrible lessons that you can teach somebody. But what's fascinating to me about what you're saying right now, though, is that it actually sounds very similar to Islam, as far as the way that women are taught that, like, that it's 100% their fault, and that men are just sort of these walking sex machines that can't control themselves, so it's up to them to keep them pure.
Yeah, I would say that that's absolutely correct. It can be a lot of comparisons and again, I want to emphasize that there is a huge spectrum among people for Orthodox Judaism, going all the way from like modern, as in like they maybe even don't keep Shabbos or like any of the halachos, but like they consider themselves Orthodox and like
Hmm.
go pray and all that stuff, all the way up to like fundamentalist, like radical Islam level, just like of all the stuff that I've been discussing, pretty
Hmm.
much. And there's a massive spectrum, but it's definitely, I would say, it's an issue because it's not even what Judaism was really supposed to be. But these people are convinced that like their way is the truth, and what they teach to their kids is that like our way is the truth, and anybody who deviates from like in the yeshivish world, modern Orthodox people are looked down upon, as in like, oh, like they're like, come on, like they're not taking it seriously, like they
Right.
like, oh yeah, like whatever, they do this, they do that, and like denominations below modern, or like I'm talking conservative reform, are actually like demonized in a lot of times in yeshivas and Orthodox circles, as like they are like trying to pervert Judaism and like destroy it. Like those people are evil, which is insane as well, because most of the time it's just people trying to keep a little tradition in their lives. But we were taught that like the reform and conservative movements are evil, and they're trying to pervert the real Judaism.
I was going to ask you about the reform movement as well. I mean, it's not. I mean, I wouldn't even know. I don't even know if movement is the right term for it anymore. I mean, I know a lot of
Right.
Jews who just like they even welcome criticism. They welcome criticism and encourage people to disagree with them, and they have no interest in even really spreading what they believe anymore. They just want to kind of be in society, and that's and they call themselves Jewish, and that's about all there is to it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really the case. So the reform movement actually did start with like, obviously it had to start from a break off from Orthodox, if that was there before reform.
Hmm.
So it was a breakaway from Orthodox, and at the time the rabbis were like, this is going to destroy Orthodoxy, and that's kind of the attitude that has kind of like prevailed until today. But that's very clearly not the case anymore. You know, the majority, I would say, of Reformed Jews are just people who may not have even raised knowing they were Jewish, or may not even be Jewish, and you just want a taste of the Jewish culture and experience. Like that's really what the majority is today. Very few conservative and Reformed Jews are like trying to reform the religion and like this is how it should be. Like it's just like we do things this way. Like why would you bother us? Like
right. Yeah.
But there definitely is that aspect of they're not looked upon too kindly in the Orthodox community.
So what was the next step for you? Were you sort of questioning all of this up until your graduation, or at what point did you start saying, like I don't think that I want to have anything to do with this?
So yes, so I around like 11th grade, I would say I started to have those doubts. Like I said, I was having those conversations, and none of the answers were really satisfactory to me. And at that point, I started kind of rebelling. And I kind of like started like, I bought myself like a computer and started like watching movies and then doing all this stuff that like my parents would be like, no, you can't do that. And I'd be like, well, screw you. Like, I'm going to do what I want. Like I'm 17, like I started getting pretty rebellious. At a certain point, I started like making some friends that weren't religious, and I started, the first time I ever like hung out with girls, like just hanging out, not even like any like dating or anything, just hanging out with girls as friends, was when I was 17. I had never done it before then, outside of like, like a meal at someone's house and like having a conversation. Like it is like, and it was such a foreign idea to me, something that I had to really work on actually, and not being uncomfortable because of that, that fetishization aspect of it. Like in my mind, girls were sex objects. Like that's all there is to it. Like
right.
It took me a long time to be able to see them as just people. Like,
yeah.
So that kind of started happening, and I started, I started not keeping Shabbos and not keeping kosher, and actually both of those things are burned into my mind. I remember like the first time that I stopped it. First time I used my phone on Shabbos. Using any electricity on Shabbos is strictly forbidden. It's turning off lights, phones, computers, anything, strictly forbidden. And I remember the first time I was like, my hands were shaking, like really shaking. Like I was like, I felt like this like adrenaline. Like I really felt like I might be hit by a lightning bolt at any moment. Like for real. Like it was crazy. And I remember the first time I didn't keep kosher. Like I walked to 7-Eleven and bought myself a bag of Doritos, and I was like, am I really gonna do this? Like, am I really about to eat these Doritos? Like, and just like go to hell? I'm like, you know what? I guess I am. Like. And that's really how it felt. Like that's the choice it felt like I was making: Doritos or hell. Like,
whoa,
yeah, it's a tough choice.
Did you know anybody else that was questioning their faith at the same time as you? Like, did you have anybody that you could talk to at this time?
So unfortunately, not really. Most of the people that I started becoming friends with were already either on the lower end of modern Orthodox or not even religious at all. Their families weren't very religious, so they never really had to struggle with these problems. It's kind of interesting, it kind of speaks to the overall percentages of Jews, of Orthodox Jews who do leave the community. I'm not sure what it is, but I know it's fairly low. And it kind of speaks to it in that, throughout my elementary and high school experience, I would say, in my class, in elementary school is quite big. I had like 60 boys in 3 different classes, in my grade, and I would say maybe 10 out of those 60 are not observant today, and for maybe 10, like probably less, and for high school, I am the only person in my class that I am aware of that is not religious today, out of a class of 25.
Now,
so it's not super common.
Yeah, and when you say that, do you mean that like they just don't consider themselves Orthodox? Like they don't say that they're how should I put this? Like, is there a difference between saying that you're not an Orthodox Jew and saying and like actually just not being in the community anymore? Like, could you be an Orthodox Jew but not be in an Orthodox Jewish community?
So you could be, and for various reasons, sometimes people have to live in places where there is no community. It does happen occasionally, but one of the fundamental parts of Orthodox Jewish life is the community. It's going to shul on Shabbos. It's having these community events. It's taking care of each other within the community, like charity and visiting the sick are also commandments. Like there's a lot of bad stuff too, but there's a lot of good stuff as well in there.
Mm-hmm.
Inviting people into your home, like having guests, it's a commandment. Like you're supposed to make guests feel welcome, like just as much as you're supposed to not touch women. Like,
yeah.
And but the community is a fundamental aspect of an Orthodox life, and like every decision, like where you live, where you send your kids to school, it all has to do with how far are you from this, how far walking distance from that. Because again, you can't drive on Shabbos, so you have to walk to the shul, so it has to be within walking distance. And if it's 5 miles away, nobody wants to walk an hour and a half each way to get to shul. It's really hard. So
right.
everything is taken into consideration around the community, pretty much. And on the same note, the community is absolutely a massive aspect of court of public opinion. Sort of is very much alive in the Jewish community. Everybody knows what's going on, in the communities, and it depends on where you live. Out of town communities, there is less of this kind of like inter-community stuff, but for sure in like New York, like if somebody sees you like going to like a pizza store that doesn't like have the best kosher certification, like that could stop your kids getting into a school or like stop your daughter getting married, like absolutely could. Like and that's always on people's minds. More so for the girls though. Like I know this from speaking with people that like girls are constantly told like you dress like that, you're not going to get married. Like you do this, like someone sees you, like you're not going to get married. Like it's going to affect your prospects. Like you can't do this. Like for boys, there's definitely more leniency. Like it's far more common. Let me put it this way: it's far more common for boys to kind of be rebellious and mess around and then come back to the faith than it is for girls. Partially because there is a lot less patience for the girls. Like once a girl is like once she's already gone off and done her thing, people are like, and it's because of marriage. Like people have no problem with the person, but like for guys, it's like more acceptable to mess around before. It's not acceptable, but like if it has happened, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. It's like, oh, look at him now. Like he recovered. He's great. He's fine now. Like he just had a rough patch. But for girls, it's like you're defiled. Like it's almost that mindset. It's not spoken that way. It's not like you lost your virginity, you're defiled. Although there is a concept of that, but like it's not like that doesn't apply today. But that mindset does apply. Like for girls, they'll have a much harder time in the community and getting married, and in general, if they were seen to have broken away.
Well, everybody's raised as though men are responsible for themselves, but women are responsible for both themselves and men.
Yeah, which it's not great.
Yeah, you wanted to talk about arranged marriage earlier as well, and I don't want to go too far and then forget about that. You said
absolutely.
Like how it's not necessarily arranged marriage as much as it's like very high pressure marriage.
So yeah, so the way it works in Orthodox communities is they have something called the shidduch system. We've got a nice ch in there for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the shidduch system. Shidduch means matchmaking, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works is because boys and girls are not supposed to fraternize and speak to each other. How are they going to get married? Well, the way it works is the parents and sometimes an independent third party who specializes in this matchmaking kind of vet both a boy and a girl and try to match them up. The boy and girl have absolutely no part of this process. They are told like, hey, I think you should go out with X. I think X would be good for you. And you're like, okay, fine. And you go and you meet this person. And again, it's on a spectrum of how religious the community you're in, but it ranges from meeting the person and kind of like dating them for a bit, like, and then kind of like getting a little more serious about it, and then like waiting a little longer. to like yeshivish is more like like meet somebody, go on maybe 4 or 5 dates, and then like get engaged like immediately, and then like once you're engaged, like it's already fine, like the wedding will happen like in a few months or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just get it out of the way as fast as possible. Like you definitely do not really know the person
Right.
extremely well at all. You know, a few months maximum. They've never even touched this person that they're about to marry in their life. And all the way up to the most extreme, which is pretty much just arranged marriage. Oftentimes the girl can be 18, literally just finished high school, and they're like, okay, go meet this boy. Like the families, we think it'd be good, and the girl doesn't really have a say. Like she's been raised in a community where her opinion is meaningless because it is meaningless. Like nobody really cares what your opinion is. Like it's what the religion says we need to do. That's what matters. And so the girl will marry this person who I think they meet once or twice before the wedding. Like the halacha in the Talmud is that you cannot marry a woman without looking at her face. So they take that like literally, and they're like, okay, look at her face for 30 seconds, and like then you don't see her again till the wedding. Literally like that. So, but that's very extreme. That's not super common. What's much more common is like it's kind of in the middle of that, where you meet a girl, you don't really know her, you definitely don't touch her, you most likely have not interacted with women very much outside of your immediate family. You kind of have to just get over that immediately and just learn how to talk to girls, and it's a bit easier for both parties because they're both there to get married. You know, they're not there to have sex or to date. Like the goal for both of them is to be married as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So and to start having kids and like start a family. So that makes it a little easier when they're both on the same page like that. But you know, if you haven't spoken to the opposite sex really ever in your life, it's gonna be difficult.
Yeah.
And then they'll get married very quickly, and start having kids basically. And what I was told growing up when we would ask about this and be taught about this is we would be given the statistics and be told, look at the Goyish world. You know, in the Goyish world, 50% of people get divorced. You know why? It's because they meet somebody, they live with them for 3 years, and then they get married. And they're so focused on themselves the whole time. They're worried, is this person perfect for me? Is this the right person? Like they wait so long to see if the person is perfect. But in Judaism, we don't believe that in a person being perfect. We believe that you're supposed to just marry the person who strikes your kind of the first opportunity you really get that seems appropriate, and then kind of build the relationship through the marriage. That's what we were always taught. That the beauty, the reason why there's such a lower divorce rate in the Jewish community is because we have this concept of building the marriage after you meet somebody, not before. I kind of realized almost immediately. I was like, well, I think that the lower divorce rate in the Jewish community might have to do with the incredibly high stigma around divorce and the way you'll be treated, because divorcees are, although it's a normal part of Jewish life. It's discussed in the Talmud, divorce and how to do it and all the stuff, and there's rules behind that as well, and all the. It's not like a bad thing per se. Although another kind of sexist thing is that a woman cannot get divorced from a man in Orthodox Judaism. Like a woman cannot leave the marriage. A man has to be the one to give a divorce, and a man can actually choose to not give the divorce and prevent the woman from getting remarried. And in that case, actually, that man is like considered an evil person, and like we do everything we can to convince him to divorce her. But he has the right to do that, and he can stop his ex-wife from getting remarried in the face.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Were you a part of any of that? Like, did anybody try to get you married in the time that you were there?
No, I started having my doubts and started to disconnect towards the end of high school, which for boys also traditionally get married later than girls, a bit later in their life. So by high school, nobody would be pressuring any boy to get married immediately, unless they're in like a fundamentalist like Hasidic community, which is like really really extreme. But I never had any of those experiences. I did remember thinking as a kid, I'm like, I'm really gonna marry somebody like I barely know. Like I remember thinking about that, but luckily, not a problem I have to deal with anymore.
How did you get away?
So it was a gradual process. That's what happened. There isn't much. there isn't much like community pressure necessarily to stay within the religion. There's definitely like people kind of do their own thing. It's not like people will keep tabs on you, but like that's for their own personal knowledge. Like I'm not gonna let him marry my daughter, or like I'll tell that person like don't let him marry. But it's not like we need to keep you in the faith. Like they'll try and they'll if they get the chance, but it's not super emphasized. Probably because there's a fairly low rate of people leaving. It's not considered a massive problem, although the quote unquote problem has grown in the past 30, 40 years as the world becomes more secular and more information becomes available to people through the internet and things like that. But it's I started having my doubts and I kind of started, I stopped really keeping Shabbos, and I would eat kosher outside the house, and I would do stuff like that, and my parents were very unhappy at first. There's some stuff in our family history, like we had some people in our family who like fought very hard for the right to be Jewish, like when they were in Eastern Europe in the 19th and 20th century. They were persecuted a lot, and like that really stuck with my dad. And it always hurt him a lot, like to see me like ignoring the traditions that like his grandparents had to fight so hard for. But like I would tell him like that's nothing to do with me. Like I have to live my life, what my grandparents did in Lithuania in 1800 has nothing to do with me.
Right.
And so so actually kind of interesting. In the Orthodox community, there is a very strong tradition that kind of started in the last 100 years, which is after high school, for both boys and girls, they go for a gap year of Torah study before they either get married for girls or continue studying or learn a trade and get a job for boys. Like in the past, like 50 years, I would say many of these kind of schools, and I guess it's kind of comparable. Like I think I've heard that like Mormons have something similar, like where they send them to like a seminary or something like. But the idea is to kind of solidify everything that's been taught and in like a different environment as more of an adult, basically. Now there is an interesting distinction, however, between the boys. The boys kind of go to yeshiva. For both boys and girls, most of these places are in Israel. Which is like the Jewish homeland, ideally, as written in the Torah, like that is the place given to the Jews by God, so that is the place where Jews wanted to live. And we're not going to get into the politics of Israel, but a lot of Orthodox Jews live there, and they have these schools. For boys, it's just called yeshiva, kind of the same idea, just on a more adult level. And for girls, it's just called seminary. I'm not even sure what the Hebrew term for it is, but it's just referred to as seminary. Now the interesting thing is for boys, it's kind of like it depends where you go. Like if you go to a very serious one, like you'll expect it to be very serious. But for many of these yeshivas, the view is kind of like it's like let the boys like have a little like relaxation, like it's okay if they like go out and get drunk or like whatever, like they're just enjoying their newfound freedoms, like they're learning how to become adults, like but they're also like learning Torah and like staying serious and like getting inspired, like so it's okay, like it's not a big deal. And again, it's across the spectrum, and it depends. Like if you were a little rebellious in high school, maybe like your teachers would recommend you go to like a little more rebellious place so you'll fit in a little better there and be inspired. But for girls, there is a lot less of this concept, kind of touching again on this concept that girls have a lot less leeway in Orthodox Judaism than boys. For the girls, these are like very serious, these seminaries, and it's kind of in my eyes, from what I've heard and seen, it's much more of the idea of like solidifying the indoctrination, like this is where like your teachers like hammer it into you, and unlike the boys where like they kind of have more free reign, more or less, like they can kind of come and go and do what they want, like they're adults. The girls are like heavily watched and like heavily like patrolled and make sure that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing and exactly where they're supposed to be doing. Again, not across the board, but there's a lot more of that in the girls than the boys. And again, that also ties back into like what are people going to think about you? Like if people see you doing this, you're not going to have your prospects here, this, that. That's pretty much the distinction on the Orthodox level. So for me, after high school, although I was kind of not religious, and like I had started like I had started like hanging out with my friends, and like I would smoke weed on Shabbos, which you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos, so it's all bad. Like I was kind of like just being rebellious, 18-year-old. Um, uh, all my friends in school who were pretty much still my main social group were all going to Israel for different yeshivas. And my parents it wasn't really like discussed. Like I didn't really have much other options because I wasn't the best student to begin with in either subjects. I often found myself quite bored by Hebrew studies and English studies. I don't want to pin it entirely like on the teachers, but let's just say that private schools can hire people who are not actually teachers. That is the law.
Right.
And many of the people that were teaching me throughout my schooling career were not very good teachers. Many of them were not teachers at all. Um, so I don't want to pin it too much on that and try to avoid the responsibility because I was not the greatest student. But the point is I definitely was not like I wasn't getting accept offers from Ivy League schools. I definitely was not lined up to go to any college. I didn't even take the SAT in 12th grade. Like no, pretty much no one in my class bothered, so I just didn't even bother.
Dude,
And
no judgments. I have no idea how I got through high school. It was yeah. I don't remember doing homework for like half of 12th grade.
yeah,
So yeah,
same,
you're good.
same.
Don't worry about it.
So yeah, and at that time, like my rebelliousness had started to leak into other areas of my life. I pretty much just stopped giving a crap about everything.
Hmm.
And I was like, I was a combination of teenage angst, and figuring out that this religion isn't really for me. And the only thing that I know isn't for me. And so I started being a little more rebellious, and again, so I didn't really have any other options. Like my options were basically go to community college, which it wasn't such a bad option, but nobody else in my class was going. Nobody I knew was going yet. Everyone was taking a gap year first.
Hmm.
So I was like, whatever, like I'll just take the gap year. How bad could it be? So what ended up happening was I went to one of those yeshivas that is definitely geared to more rebellious kids. Most of the kids in that yeshiva were from New York communities. They were like rebellious yeshivish kids who kind of still were with it though, like more like kids from like the families that I was talking about in the beginning, like who really live that lifestyle. Like the father's rabbis and the brothers are studying and the sisters are studying, and like everyone's
Hmm.
very serious. Plenty of like because it still happens that kids rebel in those families, but a lot of times like they'll send them to like a place like this, and they'll kind of get themselves out of it and realize. I think the incidence of those kind of kids coming back is much higher than people like me who kind of like were confused about the whole situation in the first place.
Hmm.
But so anyway, I went there and I met a lot of these New York kids who were like rebellious, and a lot of them, here's the thing though. I kind of went because I didn't really have an option. I didn't feel like I had an option. Um, Most of the kids there, they kind of wanted to be there. Like they were rebellious, but like they kind of like wanted to see if it was still for them. I had already kind of made my decision almost unconsciously, and I was just like, well, I guess I'm just gonna spend the year in Israel exploring and having fun. Not that's good, right? No problem. It ended up, I would say, not being a very positive experience. The positive things that I could take from it were I met several people who I would consider like lifelong friends who I really connected with, who also like are fully not religious and like also think the whole thing's bullshit. Like that's why I became such good friends with them. But and also like just exploring a country like I had been to Israel before plenty of times because I had family who lived there, but I had never been there by myself certainly, and I had never explored the country on my own, and it's a fascinating country.
Hmm.
So I did a lot of exploring, a lot of traveling. I didn't have much money, but just bummed around, and that was fun, and meeting people was fun. But overall, I would say it was just a massive waste of time because like these rabbis wanted me to learn the same Torah and the same Talmud that I had already like been like fuck this, I want nothing to do with this,
Right.
and I still wanted nothing to do with it. And very very quickly, like I kind of tried at the beginning, but very quickly it turned into like within maybe 2 months or 3 months out of a year, I was like, I have no interest in learning, and that's all that is done here. Like, there's no secular studies at all. It's just learning all day and like, and a lot of free time, way too much free time. And even more specifically, as since this place was kind of for rebellious kids, like you had a lot of leeway. Like I spent half the year sleeping, like just sleeping in bed, doing nothing, like and watching movies on my laptop, like I just completely wasting my time. You know, even about halfway through the year, I think I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, I don't think this is really working. Like, I want to come back, and he's like, Dude, you know, you said you wanted to be there, so now you have to finish it. I'm like, really? Like I kind of I tried to bail, but I didn't get a chance to. So I ended up more besides for meeting people and traveling, which was nice. Pretty much just a complete waste of my time. And it was actually at that point where I started to have some real existential issues and crises that I still honestly I'm struggling with today because I know this was not so long ago. It was like 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Right.
Um, where even less. Where I would be like, what am I even gonna do with my life? I'm really gonna go to hell. Like I'm really like I just felt so much conflict and like I just really had no idea. Like I felt so lost. Like I had no like you know no English really education, not a great one, and all this you know I spent the first 18 years of my life filling my head with all this Talmud and crazy intricate laws and getting tested on all of them. Literally like more than half the day was devoted to these Torah studies. Like it was the main focus. And like now to find it like it's all like I still know all of this stuff. Like I can still rattle stuff off and like give you lists and all this stuff of all the laws, but like to have it like just be so you know pointless to me. Like I was really struggling with these things. Started dealing with anxiety and depression towards the end of that year, and it was not a good experience, I would say.
How are you doing now? How do you feel mentally these days?
Um, Definitely better. Like right now, I'm in college, and kind of just being exposed to true, like an actual education has been so eye-opening for me because, like I was saying earlier, you know, even when you're taught secular studies in Orthodox Judaism, it's all through the lens of Orthodox Judaism. It's all been vetted by the rabbis. You know, like they will uh, take pages out of the books. They will censor the books. They will not allow certain books. They will make sure evolution is not really taught or, you know, like, or however it is. And they'll definitely reinforce their own opinions on you when you're in their class.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, you know, I kind of struggle with that and, and being exposed to this to real secular education, you know, taking a psychology class and being taught about like human sexuality and like different theories and stuff, and just having it approached from such an objective, like scientific way, like it was something that was so eye opening to me and like so important that like that really helped me a lot. Like to see well, it's not too late for me. Like I can still like completely like get any job I want and like learn anything. Like I just have to I might have to apply myself a little harder, but it's totally doable.
This concludes part 2. In the next episode, Isaac and I talk more about sex, and then discuss the alienation he's felt since he's left the Orthodox community. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and leave a written review with 5 stars. Most importantly, share the show with someone you trust.